name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. All week long, as I've been listening to these words, reading them again and again, praying and studying about the gospel and epistle for this morning, I've just kept coming back to these weird, sad, goofy love songs. You know the ones. Everybody plays the fool sometimes. Right? But I don't know that that's the kind of foolishness that St. Paul was talking about in his first letter to the Corinthian church. Because although we do love to read a later portion of this text about love is patient and kind, overall this epistle is a lot more like a detention slip than a love letter. Because the church at Corinth was behaving really badly. They were just being mean to each other. And Paul was trying to get them on board with what should be a basic notion, that if you're going to call yourself a Christian, you've got to be good to each other. He's reminding the church at Corinth something that we too might prefer to conveniently forget, that when we fell in love with Jesus Christ, with this man and all that he lived and taught and healed and loved, we fell in love with a love fool, and we have to be fools for love too. So maybe those doo-wop earworms about being smitten and seeing everything differently aren't too off after all. After all, the life of Jesus and the letters of the apostles are full of calls to see things differently, to go through life differently. Things that we take for granted as normal, reasonable, are shaken up in the Gospels. What we think is wise is foolish. What we think is foolish is wise. And how we used to live doesn't make sense anymore when Jesus is part of the picture. When God became human as a poor baby to an unwed mother in an occupied territory. Or when Jesus' first miracle was for party wine. When he made a giant scene in the temple that we just heard about. Or when he affirmed the self-advocating touch of the hemorrhaging woman. When he ate with the outcasts with nothing to gain, and challenged the powerful when he had everything to lose. Foolish was becoming wise. I can almost imagine people around town having a nice little chat and a gossip about Jesus. He is just way too much. What an embarrassment. He's hanging out with all the wrong people. He had such a promising start. He doesn't live in the real world. That young man doesn't have any common sense. The way that Jesus lived didn't make sense in his time, and it doesn't make sense in ours. In fact, the way Jesus lived is what got him killed, which for the Apostle Paul is really the heart of the matter. This message of the cross, the foolishness of the cross, is a story of how this strange teacher and miracle worker and rabble-rouser got himself killed because he wouldn't stop talking about radical love and an alternative vision for society. But that's not the end of the story, is it? The foolishness, the absurdity of the cross is that even killing him couldn't stop him. Not even death was powerful enough to stop that radical loving and healing, that vision of a new way of being in the world. Life won, love won, and in that, we saw that this strange teacher and miracle worker and rabble-rouser was in fact God. The journey through death and failure into something larger, a life and a love that are bigger than what we could have ever imagined, that is God's kind of foolishness. It's absurd, right? Because it abandons everything we think we can count on to be true about power and weakness and life and death and what is important. It's a massive shift in how we view the world, and we can't stay the same. And so it takes us right back again to a silly old love song. I'm just a fool in love with you. Because when we take on the name Christian and we follow the ultimate fool for love, Jesus, we find ourselves getting a little foolish too. Foolishness that looks like giving all this time and money and care and attention to the church and our faith. Which of course leads us to the next kind of foolishness, showing up to a big old room where we light candles and sing and talk to somebody that we can't see. Believing that a little munch of a cracker is going to do more than tide us over to brunch, but might actually change us, mind, body, and soul. It's a foolishness of reading a 1,000-year-old book and thinking it might have something to do with life this afternoon. But then, of course, we find that all that foolishness does start to change us. And then we get even more foolish, don't we? We get foolish enough to let go of our dignity, to sit on the steps with little kids, to find ourselves dancing through a pride parade with glitter blessings and free mom hugs for the sake of a bigger love. We find ourselves caring for people that are nothing like us, that all practical wisdom of self-preservation says we shouldn't even talk to. And there we go, giving away our time and money out of love for people we might never even meet. And then we go on and get foolish enough to think we might even change the world. I see Fools for Love from St. Paul's, Chattanooga, going out and advocating for just policy, for better schools, when their kids are long raised and gone, believing that we do have enough food for everyone. Following, too, in the examples of such holy love fools as St. Francis, who went off talking to birds, and those beautiful saints down in Montgomery who were foolish enough to walk every day instead of taking the bus that passed them by, thinking that maybe they could change the world. And sure enough, they did. In his letter, we see that Paul calls out those who only want a sign or only want reason and wisdom. And of course, we might prickle a little as good Episcopalians. We love a sign or a symbol, don't we? And we love to think well and deeply about our faith. But I think what Paul is trying to get to is that the beauty of signs and symbols and the rigor of reasoning and wisdom are not the core heart of the matter. That's not why we fell in love, and it's not enough to sustain us. No, we are able to follow Jesus into loving foolishness because he showed us the way and because he walks with us. We can go because we have a relationship with God. We are connected to this man thousands of years ago because of the Holy Spirit's presence with us right now, today. And we have the courage precisely because of the scandalous foolishness of that death that would not stop with death. The resurrection teaches us, Easter teaches us, that no matter how absurd this way of love foolishness might seem to the people around us, to us, it is powerful and it is true and it will not be stopped. Friends, this is my last time to stand in this pulpit and preach beautiful, foolish words to you. And I am so thankful, more than I could ever say, to have been a fool in love with God and all that God has made alongside you here at St. Paul's. Because after all, Maybe that's the final thing we can see in today's epistle. We do not walk the way of love foolishness alone. Paul isn't writing just to one person, but a community, a beautiful, messy disaster of a community that needed to remember that they walk the way of God's foolish love, not alone, but together. It is together that we can remind each other of this path we're on, of the love story we are in. We can keep the courage together to follow faithfully into foolish love. We can keep the faith. Jesus, our love fool, taught us and teaches us still this foolish, beautiful way of love. And he promises to be with us and walk with us, showing us this weakness that is strength, this death that is life, this foolish love that might just change the world. So let us follow him in it together. Let us be fools for love too. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.